Hey, friends, welcome to another episode of the Digitally Overwhelmed podcast. I'm Cynthia Pacheco, your host, and I run Digital Bloom IQ, where I help health and wellness businesses get found in Google and heal more of the world. This is the final episode for 2021. I can't believe it. It's episode 2020. And I have a very, very, very special episode, just kind of like closing out the year. This is a guest episode with my friend Hillary of Proximos Web, and we just run through what the options are for small business website platforms. And I've been wanting to do this episode for a while. And, initially I thought I'm just going to do it on my own. But I really was excited about bringing Hillary on because she has a lot of knowledge, and I feel like we're really able to complement some of the technical considerations as well as business considerations, marketing considerations, because when you're a small business owner, there's a lot of different things you can invest in, and finding a website that's going to help you grow and just like move in the direction both with your short-term and long-term goals is really, really important. And the other thing is that things have changed quite a bit. I have a couple episodes where I compare Squarespace and WordPress. I think I did do like a general overview of some website platforms a few years ago, but it's been a while since I've really done an in-depth overview. And I felt like it was time. It was just time. So this is just like a great conversation. We go into quite a bit of detail. Some things we compare across platforms are like cost, usability, scalability, things like support and security. Security is a really hot topic right now that I haven't talked about a lot, but it's a big question when you're, just looking at these platforms, because at the end of the day, you need to decide, do you want to hire someone to monitor the platform, or do you want to invest in a service that has that already kind of included? So something to keep in mind. So we cover WordPress, Squarespace, Wix, we talk quite a bit about, and then some smaller platforms like TextPattern, Jevkill, and then I think there was one more that came up. We do mention Shopify and Kajabi. So just wanted to give you a little preview if one of those are what you're looking at. All right, my friends, enjoy this episode with Hillary. Hillary, how's it going?
Hi, and action.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm glad that you made it to the podcast after all our Clubhouse chats.
I know. And who would have thought? I never thought when you asked me to be on your podcast that you'd be on my podcast first.
Right. You got yours up and running super fast, and
I just dove into it, as unprofessional as it is. But yeah, sometimes you just have to bite the bullet, go with it.
yeah, and Anchor makes it so easy. Like, it's ridiculously easy.
It's so good. I love it. Some people don't like Anchor. I'm like, what's not like to like? It's free. It takes MP4, which is handy because that's how Clubhouse gives us the file as well. It's after distributing it across Apple and Spotify and Google Podcasts and a million others that I had never heard of.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I think it's so smart. I found out about it after I'd started my podcast, and it's more work for me to switch over. I really like my workflow anyway, but I'm just so impressed and also just happy because it makes it so much more accessible if you don't want to like get a professional mic, or if you don't want to learn all the how to buy hosting like for podcast audio. It just makes it so easy. Like, why not?
Exactly. Yeah, my thoughts exactly. I couldn't agree with you more.
But anyway, we're not here to talk about podcasts. So basically, for everybody listening, I've been thinking a lot about this topic of just best website platforms for small businesses. And this is a big topic. It's not something we're taking very lightly. But my intention with this episode and the reason I decided to invite Hilary is just really getting business owners to take ownership of this decision, whether you're starting fresh with a new website or you're migrating or you're considering migrating. And Hilary has, she has more technical background and a lot more information that I don't, necessarily have. And so I wanted to open the floor to have this conversation so that someone could walk away with some clarity and potentially all more questions to consider. Hopefully not overwhelming questions, but just things to really think about, because it is a decision that we were laughing before hitting record that this answer of like, it depends is going to come up a lot. Because it does depend, right? It really does depend what you're building, what you want, what you envision, even beyond your website. What is your business? And that can make a big impact on your decision here. So Hilary, welcome to the podcast again. Why don't you go ahead and quickly introduce yourself, and we can just dive into this topic.
Sure. My name's Hilary. I trade as Proximal Web Design since 2007, and I'm a web designer that specializes in SEO. So I would have actually discovered SEO through initially trying to make my websites more accessible to disabled people, and kind of inadvertently also solved for Google. So, Google is also a blind web crawler. Right. That can't see or, anything on your page. And so if you were to make your website more accessible, it actually also made it more accessible for Googlebot, who we found out recently is called Crawly.
Really? I didn't know that.
Somebody found the alt text on a page that was published by Google, and in the alt text was the name of the crawler, so they call it Crawly.
That's just adorable.
Isn't it? It's cute. And it was a cute little drawing of him as well. So yeah, that's how I would have first kind of got into SEO. And then the other part that I, in my business, just noticed in general about web design and SEO and how they're related was this idea that you build somebody a website, you give it to them, so they take ownership. You maybe create an account for them and you give them a content management system, which we're going to discuss today. And that you feel that your job is complete and there's no kind of ongoing relationship with that business. So from there, how does a business take this website that potentially, cost them a lot of money? It might have been expensive. It might have been a big deal for them to really invest into this one specific area of their business. They could have spent the money in something else, but they decided to go their website. So what do they do now with the website? And I saw so many business owners that had invested so much money into the build and launch of the website, and then after the launch had no clue what to do. And if they did reach out to the web development company, there was no communication back, because the web development company just doesn't provide the service, this kind of ongoing service of like helping you to publish content to it and making sure it's fast enough. And sometimes some web development companies, and I'm not saying all, because there are brilliant companies out there, but sometimes they don't like to be, let's say, annoyed with those details. So they may have launched a website that is very poor on performance. They may have given them a website that's loading really slowly.
Right.
But it's functional. And so because it's functional, they feel that maybe, I've fulfilled the spec of what I was asked to do. Yeah. But the reality is the customer isn't getting either the traffic or the leads that they need to get for that website to pay for itself ultimately.
Yeah.
So what I discovered over the years is that I was able to do that. I was able to launch websites that were speedy enough and had enough kind of built in for accessibility, which also, for SEO as well, for speed, for ease of updating. Just there's so many different things around user experience and everything, that I was actually able to make websites that brought in traffic and leads and sales, you know.
Yeah.
Now the job has changed, as we're going to discuss in this podcast, because I actually, in my job today, I don't necessarily need to build the website for anybody anymore.
Right.
So sometimes I'll be working with a web development company and maybe they've done the website. And so I can plug in. So where they may fall down on those aspects, I can then come in for my client and get the website actually working and
Yeah.
paying for itself. They can make their money back basically from
Right.
whatever they invested. So that's kind of what I help people to do. But yeah, I don't even necessarily need to build a website anymore. I can go in and do that whether they had a Shopify website or they have a web development company that they had built something. So in that sense, my job has changed, you know, from what I started out as.
Yeah.
But then in another sense, the ethos of what I do is exactly the same,
Yeah.
which is just to make sure that the website is actually performing and people
Yeah.
aren't left to their own devices, floundering, wondering, oh, why, like, I've invested all this money, maybe I've invested all this time. Why am I not getting anything back out of my website? That should never be the case. You should
Yeah.
always be able to make your money back from what you invest in your website.
I love that. No, and it's such an important conversation. I think a lot of people don't, a lot of business owners don't think about that. They just think, okay, I need a website. I know it needs to look, you know, pretty or helpful or whatever. They don't really think about after that launch date, well, what's next? And then they get to that point and they're like, oh, what's next? And then, like you said, sometimes whether it's a web developer or an agency or whatever, and they're kind of like, well, we can't help you from here. And they're just, you kind of feel like they've, you know, something has been given to you and you've spent all this money or whatever, and you don't even know what to do with it. And so I love that. It's just so important. And it's important to have that plan in place before the launch date as well. You know, just start thinking about, okay, what are we tracking? What are the metrics? What are the conversion goals? Just so that right from the beginning, you can start tracking your goals and looking at ROI and that sort of thing. So important. I love that you mentioned that. And that's so interesting how I actually got into SEO because of web analytics. So I think a lot of SEOs, you know, no one's like, I want to be an SEO. They usually end up coming from a different angle. And then it kind of squirms its way in.
It's true. And I feel even in myself now that SEO is leading me more towards UX, user experience stuff.
Yeah.
And that's something that I just always have in the back of my mind that I would want a qualification for that though, before I would call myself that or say I was anyway specialized in it. So
Right.
that's kind of a bigger investment for me, like, to do. But yeah, there's everything you do. I remember learning that actually when I was in college. Somebody said that you'll make a sidestep, so you'll still be in the same rough area, but you'll make a little sidestep into a kind of a sister thing, you know, a sister industry or whatever, but it won't be that much different to what your original job was, like every 5 years, but that every 10 years it'll be a totally different job that you're doing.
Interesting.
And I thought that was very interesting, that that's just normal. And yeah, it is. I mean, I think especially over the pandemic, we see people sidestepping and pivoting and maybe even changing their job completely and getting upskilled or getting trained in something else. And, you know, it's nice. Like I like seeing it when it's people that are kind of going, you know, it's okay to evolve. Like I might not enjoy doing what I did 10 years ago, but maybe there's like a little sidestep I can do that's very complementary to my existing skills, but still a little bit different. But yeah, I never tire of SEO because there's so much to learn. That's the other thing.
Oh my God. It's something that comes up in our clubhouse rooms. Like I love that it's so almost broad in many ways, because there's so many angles to it. There's like technical, there's UX, there's content and keywords, and that can get into like just psychologically thinking about why people search what they search and how that's evolved, and like how people, you know, how the younger generations are using this Google differently, like how they're using longer tail keywords maybe. And that's why I think I've stuck with it, because it's like kept me interested, right?
Same. I really have a thirst for knowledge. You might be a bit like that as well. I've always got a thirst for knowledge, and I love that. I love this job for that, but I do love the technical stuff for it as well, because the code that I'm using is also evolving all the time. So I
Yeah.
never run out of like learning more stuff. And
Yeah.
that's the thing that keeps me going, you know?
We need another whole episode to talk about the benefits of being a search marketing expert.
Yeah, yeah, we actually do. Like, if you are that kind of person that, because some people would hate that, wouldn't they? Like, there would be some people that would be like, wait, what? You have to almost like self retrain maybe every 12 months because everything has changed. Um, whether it was the way you coded something or standards from Google or standards from Google impacting the way that you do your front end code on a website. Um, it's changing all the time, but I love that then. But then I know there are people out there that would be like, that just sounds absolutely horrific.
All our clients don't like doing that. They're like, oh, thank God you're doing it for me. Yeah, I definitely, I'm like, I get to appreciate that I take that off their plate sort of thing. And
Yes.
just
Yeah.
like, don't
Yeah.
worry, I'll keep track of it. I think it's just a relief for a lot of clients
Yes.
to know that someone's just kind of staying on top of it, because it changes
Yeah.
very frequently.
Oh, because like when I didn't know what I was doing, it was completely overwhelming.
Right.
Now I can sit back and relax and I know exactly what I'm doing, but that takes time, you know, and you
Yeah.
do specialize for that and you've done it over years and you gather up all that confidence. And even when something goes wrong, even if it's a rare thing that you've come across, the longer you're in a certain career, you might have actually come across the rare thing
Yeah.
already once or maybe twice. So you know how to fix it now, even though it's quite rare.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's those kind of things that like the job just becomes like so much easier. I don't know if there would be anybody listening that might be like starting out on this kind of thing. I know it's more for business owners, but even as a business owner trying to learn like the basics of these things, I remember what it used to be like, you know, and how overwhelming, and it does go to the name of the podcast, the digitally overwhelmed thing. I remember that feeling, and I remember that it took me like 2 years of like really immersing myself in web design and SEO and how to build stuff and how to make it rank in Google, everything. And it took a full 2 years before I actually felt like I've climbed the huge mountain and now I can kind of sit down and have a picnic. It felt like I was climbing a mountain. It was so difficult, but it actually does get easier. It really, really, really does.
I think there's
So
just
yeah.
so many moving components. I think that's why business owners find it overwhelming, because
Yeah.
once you learn one thing, you like find another thing, you know, it's like, oh, there's this technical part, right? And you're like, okay, I got that. And then you hear someone say something about backlinking. You're like, oh no, what's that? And then there's something else. And then there's something else. And then it feels like there's too many things. And so then people just kind of give
Yeah.
up and they're like, oh, I don't want to learn this. But I
Yeah.
think I do feel like I agree with what you're saying of, it just takes time to kind of acclimatize to the surroundings.
Yeah. And
And
like
then
keep it simple.
yeah.
And if you can invest in help, get help with it.
Yeah, and
Um,
realize your site's not the only one online. Like, you might feel like what you do is super unique, but at the end of the day, websites are code and Google just reads them. It's kind of like you can
yeah.
really break it down to simple stuff, and starting just with the awareness of where you're at now. Like, that's what I tell all my clients. Just let's start with an audit. Let's look at where are we ranking
Exactly.
now, because then we can just break it down and just look at what's gonna be the short term, the long term, the things we want to do more in the future. And so you are able to kind of start taking action on that. We don't need to do it all at once.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of, choosing a platform, what I want to cover in this episode are just a little bit of compare and contrast with some of the top platforms. And I know, Hillary, you've been doing some research, so I'm excited to hear that part of that. But what we're going to focus on here are WordPress, Squarespace, Wix, and Text Pattern, potentially mentioning a couple other ones here and there. We probably will mention Shopify. We might mention another one called Joomla. There's so many now. There's just so many platforms. But hopefully, yeah, people get some ideas. And we want to look at things like, just to compare, things like cost, usability. So, just the front end usability, as well as, how easy is it to integrate with like maybe an email platform or, yeah, all your other tools online. scalability. So looking at like for the future, if you're starting from scratch, how easily is that website going to help you, either like if you want to integrate, I don't know, like a shopping cart, or I have a lot of clients who want to like integrate a members login area. So just looking at stuff like that. And then the last is security. I kind of wanted to add here as well, like support, which kind of I feel kind of goes with security, because
yeah,
yeah, it's a topic of like, if I have issues, like who do I go to with this platform,
yeah,
right?
it's important. Yeah,
Yeah. So anyway, okay. So are you ready to dive in?
ready.
So let's kick it off with the big kahuna of all of them all, the
Single
WordPress.
kahuna.
So I mean, I'll just let you start. Like, what do you feel are your initial thoughts about WordPress today, right? So we're recording this at the end of 2021, going into 2022. What are your like initial feelings? Because WordPress has evolved quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So WordPress, I actually have something about when WordPress was founded. 2 seconds now.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's interesting to think about its evolution, because it used to be, I mean, it still kind of is the go-to tool, but it's starting to get some competition, right? And we're going to talk about why, but I think it's,
So
yeah.
yeah, sorry. So yeah, WordPress was released in 2003.
It's been a while.
It's a while, isn't it? Like you wouldn't think it was that old, but yeah, 2003.
In online internet land, it's like a grandpa.
Yeah, exactly. Now WordPress is a PHP based content management system, and that is like a dynamic server side language that lets you communicate with the database. So your WordPress website, you can create content that is then stored in a database, and then you can retract that content or get that content to display it on a page, kind of like on the fly. So yeah, it's a PHP MySQL solution. What I found really interesting when I was looking into this is that I had actually been unaware of exactly how close or far away WordPress's nearest competitor was. So in terms of like how popular is WordPress as a PHP based CMS, let's call it, they have now this is from W3 Techs. So they do reports, like they keep tabs on various things on the internet, and they kind of give us accurate reporting on it. So there's 34% of websites that they don't know what CMS runs them, and in some cases maybe there's no CMS. It might be the, let's call it, web 1.0 way of just putting HTML pages like linked together without any dynamic code or database.
I've seen people do that still.
Yeah, it's actually making a bit of a resurgence because of all the security stuff, because it does make it very secure when you don't have a database at all.
But
so yeah, very unwieldy. Yeah, very unwieldy. So if you take away that 34% that we don't know, what CMS they are, so you just take the balance of these are all of the websites on the internet that we know what CMS they use. Mm-hmm. WordPress has 65.1% market share, and their nearest competitor, Shopify, has 6.5%. And I was not expecting that, because in my head, I kind of thought it would be Shopify, but I thought Shopify would be a third of WordPress's market share.
Right.
And then if we go down the list, so we have a couple of the CMS systems that we're going to talk about today. But as you go down the list, you'll see some of the ones we'll make mention of today listed at even smaller amounts of market share. So if we go, WordPress is 65.1%, Shopify 6.5% market share, Wix 2.9%, Squarespace 2.7%, and Joomla 2.7% as well. So they're equal in terms of market share. So they'd be like the top five, right, in terms of like popularity, I suppose, or what people have actually installed to run their websites. And the results really surprised me. I just hadn't like looked at this before.
Yeah.
And obviously we know WordPress is really big, but I didn't really, when you just look at the visual of like, you look at a graph and the whole graph at the top is just so wide and it's taking up the whole width. And then everything underneath is coming up like the width of a baby finger. It's to look at that visually, you go, oh wow, like WordPress is a beast. Like this is, nobody is dethroning them, let's say, anytime soon.
But I think it's because they've been around the longest. Like they've got this huge benefit, right? Because of that.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about this, right? I feel like because they're so, also I think a lot of websites, just like there's old stuff on the internet that just runs on WordPress because it's older. I know that's like a weird excuse, but like there's like older sites and maybe it's just
that's true.
site. And to migrate, like it's kind of like migrating your mansion to a house, you're like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Very true, because that didn't mean that someone chose WordPress like this year or last year. This could be somebody that has a 10-year-old website that was set up on WordPress 10 years ago. Yeah, you're exactly. And maybe it's even half abandoned.
It would be interesting to have a stat of like for 2021. Maybe I'll look for this after after we record this, like in 2021, what were the top websites created, like what platforms, right, or CMS I should say, were the ones, because I would bet
downloaded.
WordPress is still probably close to, maybe it's number one, but it's starting to get some competition.
Yes. And actually I have a really interesting link on that. So you did ask my opinion on WordPress and you might live to regret that, Cynthia.
No, I'm okay. I'm not super WordPress team. Like I like you, but you can stay over there,
Yeah. So I mean, look, like loads of people listening, obviously, even if you just look at the stats, the majority of people listening, if they have a website already, it's a WordPress website.
Right.
So I don't want anything that I say today to kind of like put you off that. Right. And I'm going to do like a little disclaimer of like, when you are the most popular CMS in the world, that's going to attract a certain amount of attention. Right. And it's going to be attention from hackers, and, hackers, their job is to find holes in the code that's there, because anybody has access to the code that runs WordPress as an open source system. They can more easily find exploits, we'd call them. And an exploit is that there's something in the code that, in the way that it's coded, an attacker, let's say, can inject their own code into your website. So if they're able to kind of successfully, insert something into your database without your permission or control over it or anything, they can then kind of get certain privileges on your website, in worst case scenario on your server, but that would be a very, very bad exploit if that was to happen. But them having the ability to inject code in against your will is a bad thing, and it means you've been hacked. Now, what do hackers do when they hack websites? Sometimes they want to put up phishing pages, like actual web pages. So what they want is that your domain, as far as, let's say, Google or, these tools that kind of tell you whether a website is safe or not, like Norton or something like that, your website is clean as far as, Google or any other third-party kind of tools consider it, and it's a genuine URL linked to a genuine business. So from their point of view, if they're able to inject code and kind of take over your website and then start creating these pages for like phishing and trying to get maybe people's credit cards and stuff, it's going to look very believable to people, because it is actually a real domain that's managed by a real business. Right. And that's what they want. So they'll be able to kind of get away with it for a certain amount of time until, obviously the hack would, we hope, get discovered and, fixed. So in terms of how serious hacking is, it's always been serious, but it is more so now when we are kind of in an era of GDPR regulations and other privacy regulations. I think no matter where you are in the world at the moment, I know that there are kind of privacy laws in America. We've GDPR in Ireland and Europe. So in terms of a system that you're using that potentially has an exploit and a database where you're storing your customers' names, email addresses, business names, phone numbers. Sometimes you might have payment details in there. A lot of times you shouldn't or don't. That might be handled by a third party provider, which would be better, in the sense that if a hacker does get in, okay, they may get that personal information, but they won't get any payment details. So you're kind of, you do need to construct your website with all of this stuff in mind. And just thinking about, it comes down to what you were just talking about, which was support, and which is also maintenance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the number one thing, if we look at everything with WordPress, not to start on like a negative, serious note, but you really are starting, or you're using a platform that requires like a web developer, to be on your team, or you're, whatever, outsourcing that. But someone who's basically monitoring that website every single day, installing updates, looking at security, looking at, well, something that's kind of cool about WordPress is that you have like this beautiful library of plugins that allows you to do like anything and everything you'd ever wanted to do with a website, with a website. A lot of them are free or pretty accessible. So there is like a lot of kind of flexibility. I think that's the cool thing about WordPress. But at the same time, it's like you need to take ownership of that flexibility, because that can also work against you in terms of security and vulnerability. And plugin security has been coming up a lot as well. So it's not just your code, but the plugins code. So you need to just have you need to have the time to engage with a web developer and also pay them, obviously. But someone, will be on top of that. Or unless, you want to learn how to do that yourself, but it's a whole world. So yeah.
It would be difficult. Yeah, because some, people always kind of ask like, okay, what CMS should I use? And like, what's the best CMS for SEO? And what should I use is kind of like the big thing.
Yeah.
And I kind of, sometimes it depends on how small the business is, but if I feel like it's a very small business or like a sole trader, if you can't afford like a maintenance contract with whoever built your WordPress self-hosted website, then go with a managed solution like Wix or Squarespace or any of the ones that we'll discuss, Shopify as well, if it's e-commerce. You just can't, these days, you just cannot take the chance of, okay, I got my thing built, I just spent the money on that, and now they're gone. And I have no plan for, when it's going to get updated, or what happens if it gets hacked, and is this person even available? Like, imagine it gets hacked and the person that you're going to now isn't even available to help you with that. No. There are really worst case scenario things that could take your entire website offline for an indeterminate amount of time. And you're going to spend a lot more money trying to come back from that than you would have spent maybe choosing the right solution or investing in something that's a maintenance package with somebody. So general rule of thumb, never ever have an unmaintained WordPress website, please.
It sounds like we're talking about like a crazy wild beast or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Or like poison ivy, like never ever plant it if you're not going to take care of it. But it's true, because I like what you're saying of, even if you're just starting out and like, let's say you don't have that much content on there, it's just like such a shame. Like if you invest all this time and then it gets hacked, and then, even recuperating your rankings from getting hacked, like that could, like there's
maybe
so
Google noticed and you got a manual action while you were hacked, because Google noticed that you were hacked, and now you have to spend all the money trying to come back from that as well. And depending on how reliant your business is on the website, this could take people out of business. This could be like an absolute
it's your online
Yeah.
home, right? So
Yeah.
so I think, yeah, I think the reason a lot of people, or I mean, maybe in the past, like WordPress gave you complete control of
Mm.
like who you hosted on, like where you hosted. There's a lot of
Yeah.
things to consider. So I think that's a big, I don't know if it's a pro or a con, but it's, if you're the type of person who doesn't want to have to make all those micro decisions, then going with something that is more like just self-reliant, like a Squarespace or a Wix, will be easier
Yeah.
because they take care of all that stuff for you. So
Exactly.
again, there's no right or
And
wrong, just like
there
FYI for
isn't.
everybody's listening. We're never going to be like,
Yeah.
go with one.
And
You have to consider.
as your business grows as well, you might decide, I want to move away from Wix, or I want to move away from whatever, and I want to have a managed full WordPress website that I have full control over, because I want to build in certain things, and I'm just restricted on these. I'm more restricted on these platforms because it's a managed solution and I can't host it where I want and I don't have control over the code, etc.
Yeah.
But at that point, you might have actually grown your business using the managed solution, and you get to the point that, okay, now I can afford a WordPress website that's fully managed by a development company that I can work closely with,
Yeah.
to achieve what I want, and do it in a way that it'll be secure, it'll be updated, and it'll be better in the sense that, as you said, like there's so many plugins for WordPress, but you can get custom plugins coded as well so easily. So anything that you have in your head, in your imagination, you can almost try and achieve it with the custom solution. So, don't rule out the idea either that, you can start off with these things, and if you want to upgrade down the line, you can totally do that. Make sure you hire an SEO if you do that also.
I love that. Yeah. No, I guess the question is like, we kind of go back to the beginning, is like, what's the budget you have now? What are your short-term goals? Like, I feel it's totally possible to create a website that's like functional and, pretty and everything in a day. Like now those tools exist, and we're going to talk about that, like more of the Squarespace Wix option in a second. But if that's like, if you're in that place where you just need something today, just go with the easy option. And then
you can always,
you can always migrate, right?
Yeah, exactly. And have an SEO help you do that though.
Yes, I have another episode on migration, so we can
good. You should link that. Do. Yeah. If you're listening to us and you're going, what is a migration even? Like if you're moving from one platform to another platform, what can happen is, let's say your about page was like mydomain.com/pages/about. And then on the new website, the structure might be, you've recreated all the content and everything, but the actual URL might be like mydomain.com/about. And now whatever page Google had indexed, or maybe you link to it on social media and stuff like that, or maybe you even have ads running with URLs in, even though it's Google Ads, you also need help with that because it'll give an error because now it's in a redirect probably. But all of those URLs need to be redirected. And you do need an SEO if you're moving from one platform to another platform. You need an SEO at the earliest possible stage of planning for that.
You're moving houses.
Yeah, you're moving houses, and
you need to make sure you don't lose track of all your underwear.
Yeah, you need to, like, your underwear is categorized by color, and basically you're going to end up with all the different colors and you won't be able to find the one you want. I don't know.
Your underwear is going to be hiding in the freezer and you'll never be able to find it. And imagine walking around in day-to-day life without underwear. Like, no.
Exactly. So, don't ever rule out. Yeah. Look, you can always move from one platform to another, but it has to be done in the right way,
Okay, I want to move on to Squarespace, but I want to quickly talk about, before we do that, the topic of site speed, because I know a lot of people, like, that's a big question I get asked, or it's even a concern, what's the site speed thing? And I feel like there is a kind of tendency to think that these self-hosted, not self-hosted, like more Squarespace and Wix are like slow. But let's talk about WordPress site speed. I'll let you go first, Hillary, but like I have my thoughts as well.
Okay, I have to find an actual quote. Sorry.
I love that you have all these.
I have a quote. Okay.
From who? Someone from WordPress talking about site speed?
From actual WordPress. Yeah.
Okay.
So this was published on October 12th, 2021, and it was a public post called Proposal for a Performance Team. And it was issued on the WordPress website, and it addressed and admitted that the CMS, which is content management system, has performance issues. So I'm going to give two quotes out of this. So one is short, one is longer. So this is the start of the quote. Compared to other platforms, e.g. Wix, Shopify, Squarespace, WordPress is falling behind. Other platforms are on average faster and becoming increasingly faster than WordPress websites. And then they have in brackets, see the HTTP Archives Core Web Vitals report, and are actively investing in and marketing core performance as a feature. So I'm just going to do another small, because it's a long post, but this was just something else that they'd mentioned. Achieving reasonable performance levels shouldn't be plugin territory, but part of core.
Yeah.
So that was only issued like so recently. And I'm amazed, to be honest, that it took them this long. I suppose maybe it would take a long time because it's such a bad thing. You're kind of admitting something bad about like your CMS.
Yeah.
But the reason that I've been using text pattern for so long is because of this issue with WordPress. It's just so difficult performance wise to get a WordPress website running quickly. It's so much code, it's so bulky. Part of that is because like it's a system that's kind of trying to be adaptable to whatever you want it to do. So if you want it to be an e-commerce shop, it'll adapt to that. If you want it to be a brochure website, it'll do that. If you want it to do like, there's probably plugins that do like members login and whatever.
Yeah.
So like the code actually running WordPress is just so bulky, but it's a little bit of that it needs to be a chameleon and that it can basically be whatever you want it to be.
Right.
But it's the way that they have the core code, and the core code seems already to me very bulky and very slow, and it needs a little bit of a run over, like to make it a bit more efficient anyway. And then on top of that, you have the number of plugins that people are expected to install just for like basic functioning. And as they mentioned there, you're trying to fix a performance issue by installing a plugin
that slows down. Yeah.
And plugins are bad for speed. Like plugins are part of the problem. Like, plugins are the reason why some of those websites are coming up, 10 in page speed score, 20 in page speed score.
Yeah.
We know that's going to affect its ranking in Google, but not just that. I mean, even if you got zero Google traffic and you only send people from social media, it's going to affect them too. Because your website's just not loading and they're not going to hang around.
No.
So it's one of the reasons why I've always stuck with text pattern, which is so cute that we're giving it a mention because it's such a small little CMS, but it's so lean. It's not trying to be anything. It's not trying to do like e-commerce or anything. It's for like a brochure style website, or, if you're blogging, it's perfect. And the code is just kept so small and so lean. I have gotten on text pattern websites 100 page speed score, like perfect score. And these are websites that have graphics, they have images. But it takes effort to do that. And this is the thing, I'm kind of jumping forward to text pattern a little bit, but this is what makes it like text pattern is only like suitable if you have someone like me to manage it, right? Because it's more of like a manual bespoke. Yes, they can publish their blogs, they can publish, simple things, but really I'm going to have to go in and do like custom code in forms, or I'm going to be compressing images. And like, there's a lot of work that goes into managing a website to make it that lean, that fast, performance wise, and kind of give people that amazing boost that they can get from a very lean CMS. But the thing with WordPress is that they're trying something different, which is not the simple plain, okay, here's my blog, I can do this, I can insert an image, I can do that, and it's very simple. And people sometimes they want the bells and whistles. So like WordPress is more gone the direction of, we want a visual editor now. Like they have this Gutenberg thing that they've built into WordPress.
Yes.
So they're trying to make it like, okay, people can create their own sections and people can maybe drag and drop stuff in, and that you can kind of have like a visual representation of a full page, like without having to know code. It's a
Mm-hmm.
very ambitious thing, and I appreciate that they're trying to do this, and they are kind of bringing themselves alongside solutions like Wix and Shopify and these things that already are quite like visual platforms, and they're
Yeah.
already kind of figuring out, okay, we can have somebody kind of build a web page without knowing any code by like dragging and dropping, and having the, not having to know code, not having to know, let's say, web design as such. It pains me to say that a little bit, but they don't really, and that's what they're trying to do with WordPress.
Yeah.
Again, the more that they put into the CMS, the more clunky and unwieldy it becomes. So even this Gutenberg thing, like putting in all this code so that people can do all these fancy things, that now is adding more and more and more and more
Yeah.
into the running of the thing. And it's just so hard to have the conversation, because you're thinking like, I love their ambition, but I'm relieved that they did kind of admit that like we do have an issue with performance, because
Yeah.
you're trying to explain that to people, but people don't really understand, like, well, I just prefer like creating my blog in this because it's more visual and I can drag and drop stuff and it just seems more fancy. And you're like, yeah, it's fancy, but that's kind of why it's too slow and it's not going to perform well. And if it doesn't perform well, you're not going to get the good ranking in Google or whatever.
Right.
Like I have websites I've logged into. So first of all, I have a website that I work on that when I first started with them and it was a WordPress website, the page speed was coming up as 20 out of 100.
Oh
I had never seen anything so low. And like some pages were 15. And I was like, I just can't believe that like it's even possible to make something this slow. And it was only, this is a brochure website. A brochure website,
Right.
nothing fancy, literally just images and text. That's all it was. No videos on the page. Like, it's shocking to me that like for a brochure website that this is the standard from WordPress. But I can't blame WordPress fully. There are plugins being installed. Now it might be on the customer's request because they go, oh, I want to have this thing and I want to have this other thing and I want to have this other thing. So the web development company is like, sure. And they now install 6, 7, 8 plugins that are now also running their own code on every page that's being rendered on top of what was already being run.
Yeah.
So there's that as well.
Yeah, I think just with WordPress again, and like if we were to compare it with Text Pattern, like maybe you would actually invest the same in a web developer to maintain your WordPress anyway, because you need someone who's going to stay on top of these plugins, who's going to guide you and say, okay, we don't need to like these two do the same thing, or we don't need this one. Or even looking at things like what's the order that things are being loaded, because sometimes that's part of the site speed issue is like you've got one plugin that has a conflict with another. And so they're loading slow because they're, I don't know, fighting. I think that at the end of the day, we've already said it, if you're going to go with a WordPress, you need to, from the very beginning, have a web developer who's not just going to know code, but who's going to be able to communicate with you, decisions being made kind of on an ongoing basis, and just be able to take ownership of that. Because if you don't know how to manage that, it's just kind of like a ticking time bomb in different ways. And site speed is a big deal, not just with SEO, just like if we think about a good website experience, right? So it's something you kind of have to keep an eye on with WordPress. Now, WordPress has communicated to us, like they have teams that are looking at the site speed issue and they're looking to improve things. And I have mixed emotions. I'm not going to get into the Gutenberg new WordPress stuff, but I also agree with you of like, they kind of have to decide their direction. They can't be everything, because I think that's where they get into trouble, and it's not about adding more necessarily. Right.
Exactly. And it's a themes issue as well. Like John Mueller said this I don't know, was it a few weeks back or a few months back, but he was like, the theme that you use does actually affect like your page speed or some
Yeah.
of these core web vital stuff. And people were like, what? Like the theme matters. And it's, it is that thing of WordPress. It's almost like you're so spoiled for choice because like there's so many themes, and
so many options.
again, it comes down to not having a web design background. So you've got no web design or SEO background, and you're not even thinking that way. You're just thinking, I want a really slick, cool website. And so you find a theme that's so slick and so cool, and everything is sliding in and sliding out and like sliding down and popping up. And you think, oh my God, when people visit this web page, they're just going to be wow. But actually that theme is probably awful for accessibility, maybe could be then also awful for SEO, could be killing your page speed, could be unusable on mobile because of the length of time maybe it's taking all these fancy things to load on, people's poor little data plans if they're not on Wi-Fi. Which you have to, when people are out and about, they may be on their mobile plan, and some people don't live in cities as well, and you do have to take that into account as well.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of, people are definitely spoiled for choice, and that's a good thing. And I like that there's plugins for everything, and I like that there's loads of themes and everything. But it's maybe about just having that level of knowledge of web design without being a web designer, of like, I want a theme that is bringing usability and accessibility into it, and that's fast loading. Just have those kind of principles in your head. Rather than being, I want something that looks so flashy and stuff is sliding in and out, and things are popping up and down, and people without web design background, sometimes they think that that's the highest level of web design, and actually a lot of times the highest level of web design is like completely the opposite of that. Like very simple, very easy to find things, very fast loading. Using your traditional things, have your navigation where people expect to find it. Have things that are clickable looking like buttons. Where sometimes people get in their heads that I don't want to be the same as everybody else, so I want mine, like I like this theme because the navigation's over here, and I like that the links don't look like links anymore because that's me being different to another website. Where actually in web design it's much better to give people, because it's so frustrating for people because they don't know, is this clickable, is this not clickable, where is the navigation is normally up here in a hamburger icon, where the hell is the navigation? And people are having the worst experience on your website that you really believed was gonna wow them.
My favorite analogy is like, imagine, like, it's not about being unique. You're not creating an art project. This is your business website. But my favorite analogy is like, imagine inviting someone over to your house, and they walk in, and the first thing they walk into is your bathroom or something. And then they continue walking, and then they like can't get to the living room because the fridge is in the way. And it's like, you want people to come to your business website and know exactly how to hire you in less than like a minute, right? So to do that, you need to make the design has to be predictable. And so people think that's boring, but that is actually, that structure then allows you to infuse creativity and uniqueness within that, right? And that's why you work with a web designer and a web developer. But yeah, I've had many discussions with clients where they, whatever they want to, in the navigation, they use weird words, like instead of about, they put some other like very cryptic word, like I don't know, like, well, philosophy could be okay, but anyway, you know what I mean? Like they use a word where it's like that, just put about, like you need to have a very clear about page. The about page is like a very profitable page that's going to make you money. So let's just call it what it is. So anyway, so with WordPress, basically the biggest takeaway I can think of is you need to work with someone, right? So whether, if you don't have the knowledge, whether, the technical as well, design knowledge, you need to, and experience, it's not just knowledge, it's experience, to be able to maintain and keep track of your WordPress site, and it's just not going to work for you, right? So that needs to
Yeah.
happen from the get-go. So let's move on to Squarespace. So right off the bat, I think the biggest difference and the thing we can think about with Squarespace is that, and we can like talk about Wix as well in here, is that the hosting is kind of part of what you buy, right? So in WordPress, you have to buy your own hosting. You usually buy your domain separately as well. And then you need someone to take the WordPress code, put it on that host, which is basically a computer that's out on the internet somewhere. And that's how your website exists, because you've created that space for it. But when you buy something like Squarespace or Wix, you register, you log in, and they take care of that kind of paperwork, I guess you could say, almost of figuring out your hosting. So it's almost like they're taking all this stuff that we've gone on about the security, about the plugins, and a lot of the maintenance that happens in a WordPress site. Squarespace, they take care of it for you, which for some people feels like restrictive maybe, or maybe they don't, I don't know if you've heard anything, Hillary, but for some people it's like, well, like I want to choose my host or whatever. But it's also, it could be a relief to some clients, because they don't even need to worry about that. And they can just trust that the Squarespace team is going to have a good host. You know, it's a shared host probably, but they're still going to make sure that the site loads quickly. And in terms of the security, Squarespace is, you know, just always on guard behind that, right? You can still get hacked, but there's someone like looking at that from the first day that you hire Squarespace, and Wix as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, they're not open source. So they're like closed kind of systems. So like their code. So like with WordPress, you can download it for free, and it's open source software, I guess you'd call it, or an open source CMS anyway. So these other solutions like Shopify, Squarespace, Wix, like they have their code that runs on their platform, but you know, outsiders don't have access to that code. Now you can still try and hack it, I suppose, but you know, you can kind of, if you think about it, having the code out there for people to be able to download it and play with it and find the hole in it is an easier task than not having access to the code and trying to hack it without knowing what is actually behind there or not. And potentially easier for them to kind of catch that then. So they are like managed solutions. They have traditionally had a bad reputation for SEO and for performance, like as well. And it's so interesting.
That's
I feel like that's changing now. It is, which I've had a lot happened this year, I feel like, honestly. Well, maybe a bit last year as well.
They're like, Squarespace, isn't it bad for SEO? I just had a conversation with someone 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, no. Why do you think, like, okay, you know, it's fine. Like, it's a good question, but even Wix has this bad reputation. And I listened to, I don't know if you've heard of her, Mary Haynes. She's a SEO agency owner. Anyway, they did a Wix contest where they were, they had to compete with another agency to get a Wix website ranked on the first.
Okay, cool.
And I think they did the search term like SEO for Wix or something like that. And they got it on the first, like these like structures, these websites, they're good. Like, yes, there's sometimes less options if we compare it to WordPress. And like, maybe if you want to think about like URL structure, like Squarespace and Shopify. I don't know as much Wix, but I know both Squarespace and Shopify have very rigid structures. And so you have workarounds, but sometimes you just can't get maybe the URL, but URL is like one factor out of so many others when you're looking at, you know, an SEO strategy. And it's completely more that, like, I have my website's on Squarespace and I rank number 1 for some keywords. So it's completely possible because Google doesn't say, oh, this website's on Wix. Oh no, we don't rank Wix. Like,
Exactly. As long as Wix thinks that performance is important and it's investing into that and it's coding its system in a way that allows you to do, you know, have good performance along with the SEO things that we need as SEOs. I mean, there is no reason for them not to rank. I love that they've been investing in being able to rank, and I like that WordPress has a threat to it in a way, because it's I prefer when there isn't like one dominant. I just think it's better as a customer that you
Mhm.
don't have like just one dominant provider of something, and really there's very little choice outside of this one solution.
Right.
um so I think it's great, like it's such a positive thing as a business owner to be setting up a website today versus 10 years ago.
Yep.
Look at all the solutions you have, like it's insane. Like you can, like Shopify, I'm obsessed. I can't like I just love it. Like I just think it's such a good solution for e-commerce. I've been able to rank Shopify websites.
Yeah.
You can have a blog on Shopify, and they've incorporated that into, so it's the how they've built it, that they just think the way that we do and give us the
Mhm.
things that we need, because we can't go in there and create them because it's their system. So they
Mhm.
have to give us, something. And they have to make it that the websites load quickly. Now,
Mhm.
that is something on Shopify, depending on how you've set up the e-commerce thing, you might struggle with. But again, you're not looking for like the perfect score. You're just looking to be better than your competition.
Mhm.
Um, so like it just depends what the standard is for your industry as to
Mhm.
how far down that road you need to go for performance or perfect performance or the ability to get on page one.
Yeah.
um so yeah, it's just I guess like a level of perfectionism or something. But I love these solutions. I like seeing them come up. I found a great page actually that was from Wix. So I know that they have been investing, at least in the past year if not longer, a lot in SEO.
Mhm.
And they have a page that's on their support.wix.com website. And it's just so easy to follow. So they literally have like Wix SEO Whiz, and then they have a little drop down, show me how. And they have steps like how to start off your SEO, make your website accessible. Um, Accessibility not only helps people with disabilities or temporary disabilities, but gives Google lots of great information for indexing. And they have all of their here's the link that you can click on, and you have access to an accessibility manager, where they allow you to enable visual indicators, automatically order DOM preference, turn on advanced settings where you can add area labels, tab index, and more to custom elements. This stuff is like phenomenal. They have submit structured data markup for your site to Google. And again, show me how, and you get the link and you get the like 1 to 5 instructions.
Right.
It goes on and on. Add a blog to your website, show me how. Using Search Console, show me how.
Yeah.
So like
Great.
it's, they've invested in it. These things don't happen by accident.
Yeah.
Somebody has prioritized this.
Yeah.
So they've looked
Yeah.
at their offerings and they've said, okay, what's the biggest complaint people have about us? Maybe they
Yeah.
complain about performance, maybe it's mixed in with SEO and they complain about SEO. Okay, let's just throw resources at that. And that's what I feel that they've done.
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of like putting them together, but they are similar
Yeah.
in some ways. But I feel like
Yeah.
it's more like you have a dialogue with the team. If we were to compare it with WordPress, there is an organization, but it feels more like you're in the ether, right? Like you don't know who to really, because you're hosting your own website. It's like you have all that ownership. So you can, like, people do complain to WordPress, and we talked about how WordPress recognize their own performance and site speed issues. But with Squarespace and Wix, it's almost like faster, right? Like you can send a complaint, they get back to you. They probably have a list of potential changes. I've seen amazing progress in the SEO for Squarespace as well. I feel like they've made
Cool.
it way more accessible, way more easy for people to, change their title tags or their meta description, the structure of their blog post URLs and stuff like that. Let's
That's
talk
so good
about,
to know. I'm
yeah,
not as familiar with Squarespace, so it's so nice to know that as well.
yeah, no, it's like they've come a kind of long way. It used to be like this little thing at the bottom that was like hidden, and now it's like its own tab, and it's explained, because I think part of the job with SEO is education as well. So they also do have quite a few articles, and just, yeah, things on their website where it's easy to follow, right, the instructions. my question with Squarespace and Wix is scalability. So
Hmm.
I've seen some somewhat big websites on Squarespace, and Squarespace now does have, I believe it does have some sort of option where you can integrate like a member's login. It is not as, um, it's not as advanced or whatever in depth as maybe something you would build in WordPress. But
Hmm.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that as well, Hillary. Like, if do you feel like if someone was building like a site that could potentially get really big, do you
Hmm.
think like a platform like Squarespace or Wix would be able to handle like bigger websites? Because that would be
Oh,
something on WordPress where it's like, yeah, of course,
it's
no
a good
problem,
question.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, like I do veer towards something like WordPress or similar, you know,
Yeah.
that you can self-host and you can have a developer that codes, that can like code stuff in, and you can
Yeah.
decide, you know, what CDN, if you want to use a CDN, you use a CDN, and you can serve your
Mm-hmm.
because when you're going to be using, you know, maybe you have, it's a big website, so it needs certain amount of resources and things.
Exactly.
um it is, yeah. Again, I probably would veer to the thing of like, is it a choice between one or the other? Like, if you're the size of a company already
Yeah.
that you have, you can get whichever one you want. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't, you know, if money isn't an issue,
Yeah.
I would 100% go with something like WordPress or similar.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, just because you can build your own, you can build
Mm-hmm.
into it, you can build your own custom
Yeah.
plugins and everything. You have full control. You can control the speed of it or the
Mm-hmm.
hosting, or how much database space you're going to need and how much
Yeah.
hosting space you're going to need. You know, there's just a level of ownership that I
Mm-hmm.
think for a bigger website you probably do need. But again, like if you've started off your website on a smaller I'm calling them a smaller platform, but God, it's so hard to call these days because they've come up so much. I don't know at what point do you say,
Yeah.
actually, these other platforms are the same. Like, it's fine, they can scale, you know, because like Shopify, I mean, I think they run really, really big websites.
Yeah, no,
Um,
Shopify, I was gonna say like they're big,
yeah, they'd
they
be
can handle like large product
right.
databases and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So then that makes me feel like if they can do it, the other websites should be able to do it as well, like even the managed ones, you know?
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
agree. It kind of, it's like if you already have the resources and you have a web developer, then you're probably, you know, listening to this and getting information, but the you should just go to your web developer based on what they kind of want to maintain, right? Because maybe they'll be like, yeah,
exactly.
I don't like WordPress either. I want to use another. So what other options, like Joomla isn't self-hosted, is it?
Joomla, yeah, you can self-host Joomla. I
Okay.
was so surprised. So Joomla's in fifth place, and Joomla has had a really bad, well, I mean, I don't know. I've spoken to some people about Joomla. So people that have been in web design for a long time remember an older version of Joomla
Yeah.
that was very, 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 very insecure. Now,
I don't
maybe
think
it
that
was
was
because we
clear.
didn't know what we were doing and we didn't set it up right at the time. But so going years and years back into, like, you know, the Victorian era, Joomla was, one of the few things that were available to web developers. It was very kind of a new market, really. Um, but it was very insecure, and probably you got hacked if you had a Joomla website back in the day. Um, and it was very clunky. Again, it probably comes down to performance, actually, when you think about it. That's funny because Joomla's performance at the time would have been worse than WordPress. So WordPress came along as the, like,
Mhm.
maybe
The
leaner,
fastest.
or
Yeah.
yeah, it was just like yeah, just kind of a, I hesitate to say better because this is all subjective. This is just
Hmm.
my experience.
Yeah.
Also, I'm old, so I'm basing this on really ancient history, and I'm sure like new users of Joomla would be like, "What the hell are you talking about? It's an amazing CMS."
No, but
Um,
it's good. It's good to bring it up because, you know, again, if someone does have the resources and they're like, yeah, I have a web developer, Like, get your web developer to come to you and pitch you the different
Yeah.
hosting platforms, and don't just go with
Yeah.
WordPress because everybody says WordPress. Like, research
Yeah.
different options. You know, we've
If
mentioned
a web
Pixabay as
developer
well.
was using Joomla and they came to me and they're like, it's a great, like, regardless of the experience that I had, but that's ancient history, so I would park it. And if somebody came to me and they're like, I've been using Joomla for like the past 5 years on this, and this, it's an amazing CMS, it does this, and I've never had issues, blah, 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 blah. You could 100%, I'd be like, Joomla looks amazing. I had not even like thought about Joomla for so many years. And then when I was researching this, because it was in the top 5, I was like, Joomla from way back in the day. Like, so I looked up their website and they have a really cool way of like launching a Joomla website. I think it's on like launch.joomla.com or something. And they've paired up with a hosting company so that you basically get like, you put in whatever domain. So you get like something like, I don't know what the domain is now, but it's kind of like one of those temporary domains where you probably get your own domain afterwards and point it in. So they give you that, and you can actually, it looks like in a couple of clicks, in a very kind of accessible way, you can set up a website because they've partnered with a hosting provider, and you can do it in a couple of clicks.
Oh.
And I thought that was a really interesting concept, and just kind of almost like trying to marry the two things together, where you have this like self-hosted thing that you download it and you have to put it on your own server and set it up and set up your database and hook everything together and whatever. And then you have these managed solutions that you literally just log in and it's all done for you, and you know, you work away, whatever. But something in between, it looks like, you know, that they've kind of tried to solve for, okay, we don't want to make it like super hard for people to kind of like have to download it and install it on a server, etc., etc. What if we partnered up with a hosting company that on this kind of subdomain that they have, in a couple of clicks they could just have a working website really quick, really fast, but they could also have access to FTP, and they give access to FTP and like your traditional stuff like PHP MyAdmin. So these would be like the developer that you would normally, your web developer would be using those tools. But the way they spoke about it, it was almost like, hey, you know, you could just set up your website. You don't necessarily need access to those tools. Now, it did leave me with the question, who's maintaining the website? So, you know, so I was still a bit like, okay, this is cool because, you know, you could set up your Joomla website and you've got a couple of clicks and it's already hooked in with this hosting provider, and that's great. And you have, if you want it, you have those things like FTP and PHP MyAdmin if you're a programmer. But if you're not a programmer, like, the hosting company isn't, they're not into maintaining websites necessarily.
No.
Hosting companies, they want to maintain their servers. So what happens sometimes is that the hosting company will update the server, and then maybe you're running a version, and this wouldn't just be Joomla, this would be any content management system that you're running. So they'd upgrade the server, something on the server, and then now your website isn't working anymore. So you go to the hosting company and you go, hey, my website, have you done something, because my website was working yesterday and now today it's not working. The hosting company, it's not necessarily, well, it's not their job to update your website to make it work on their server. From their point of view, they have to keep their servers updated for the security of the server. So they'll direct you back to your web developer. So if you don't have a web developer, you're kind of left, oh crap, like I set up something on this server and it was a fully functioning website, but now something's happened, something's been updated. I don't have any web developer to update it. So I don't know, I would love if they had something like an agreement with a hosting company that like provided maintenance and updates for people or something like that as well, but on a self-hosted platform. And I don't think there's anything like that, like in terms of,
like a hybrid.
Yeah, a little bit like a hybrid. You know? I'd love to see something like that, because then you kind of end up with 3 tiers, which is one that, you know, you have a web development company and they're fully responsible and they're updating it and you work closely with them and you know who they are, and maybe they're even in your town and you meet them for coffee and lunch, you know? And then you've got something in the middle that's like, I'm self-hosted. I know maybe a little bit of code, but I don't have a web development company, but I do get updates through my hosting company. You know, if there was some kind of middle, and then you have this other model that's this managed model that's like, okay, I'm on Shopify, I'm on Squarespace. And, you know, if I get an issue with something, I send them a support ticket. Now, in the managed services case, they do support things, but where they mightn't. So like, let's say for Shopify, they'll support their own themes. So like, let's say if you set up a Shopify shop and you use one of the like official Shopify themes, if something happened that like made something not work and it was kind of the fault of the theme, or something on the actual theme had gone wrong, they'll support it, but only if it's their own theme.
Yeah.
So if it's a third party theme, you're actually stuck to contact the third party developer of the theme. So it's funny in a way. I feel like I've just gone mentally full circle, because in a way you still have a bit of a problem, because if you're using third-party plugins and third-party themes, you have to go to whoever created those third-party plugins and themes if they stop working.
Yeah. Or I mean,
even for something like Shopify, you do, you know?
Yeah, I have a client who's on Shopify, and I've had a couple clients, and I still think they need a web developer at some point, or an SEO expert who has web developer experience, because at some point, if you're scaling, so again, if you're just starting out, you can like get a Shopify site today, you can get it working, up and running, you could get your products, you could make money in the same day, right? But as you start to scale and your website, you know, has its complexities, you definitely will need a web developer to help you customize code, like you said, potentially engage with some. I've talked with like Shopify plugin, whatever teams, where if there's an issue, and they're fair, like depends on the plugin, right? But there's like, there can be a response there can be like a back and forth. So at the end of the day, again, we go back to this idea of ownership, of like, you get to a point where you have to kind of decide, okay, someone has to take ownership of my online home, whether that's me or a team member, because it requires this support, it requires this customization, right? I was just thinking, we never mentioned, so have you heard of Kajabi?
I've heard of it, but I have not like investigated it.
So this is another great option that I've heard works really well if you have a lot of online courses, and you don't want to do like a Squarespace or a Wix, and you want to like host your courses, like self-host your courses. Kajabi is a really good option, because it allows you to have a website and the whole infrastructure required for a course, like online course content, like adding videos and blah, blah, blah. And like having your, like, if you don't want to use like Teachable, or, you know, my courses are on Podia now, but you want to like self-host, then Kajabi, I've heard really great things. And I've even seen people who go for Kajabi from the beginning because they know down the line they want to expand to courses. And so they just have this, again, self-hosted option website. I don't know specifications around security, but it almost feels like everything will be better than WordPress at this point, because WordPress is so popular. Yeah, I've seen, and I have courses that I know that are on Kajabi, and everything works well. It looks nice. It's fast, because you need your course platform to run quickly, right? Like, you don't want people waiting around for like the video to load or whatever.
I love the idea of like specialized kind of services for each thing. So like, you know, you were talking about membership websites before, or whatever it might be, that might end up being really big. Now that I think about it, I have definitely researched this, and I have found providers of services that they just give you a membership website. They're not actually trying to be anything other than this is just a website with membership, and you can pay to join, and that's it. I think there are really cool options as well. There's something that if you're a blogger and you want to have some free blogs, but you want to have some paid blogs, there are solutions for that. Specialized kind of so specific, like you have to be a blogger, you have to have a community, and you have to have the need or the want to have some free and some paid articles and stuff. I love that, like specificity I love that. Specificity.
Yeah, kind of like a niche specific website. That makes a lot of sense
Yeah,
to me
I
too,
love
because
that.
if you're
Yeah.
like, I have, okay, so for example, Squarespace, I know that had a tendency at some point to like attract a lot of like photographers or like designy people. I think now they've like opened it up a little bit, but and so it would just be cool again if these platforms like just talked about, okay, I'm a photographer, so what's going to happen on my website? I'm going to have a bajillion images, so how
Yeah.
are you supporting that type of niche of industry? Because you then have another person who's like a coach or something and they don't really care about their images, you know, or their video.
Yep. Absolutely.
So
And it's so funny you brought up that example because I can't remember the name of it now. But on Clubhouse, I have heard photographers referring to some third
another one.
party managed thing that
Oh,
is specifically for photographers.
I also have heard
And
of a recent.
they love it. The idea of it, and they were asking me had I heard of it and should they use it, and I had never heard of it.
And we don't remember it now. I also
And I don't
heard of
remember
it.
what it was called even, but it was
Oh.
a managed service, so more like Squarespace now or whatever that it would be managed for you.
Yeah,
It was one of those, but again, I love that idea of having the actual niche, because this is the thing with things like WordPress or those broad stroke things. You're trying to be everything for everyone.
Yeah.
Like, I'll be your photographer's website, I'll be your memberships website, I'll be your e-commerce website, I can be your paid blog and your membership website and your merch store, you know, all in one. And now you have, like, let's say that was a WordPress thing, and now you have, like, you know, 15 plugins installed at least to achieve all of that.
Right.
You know, I just like the idea of giving the people just what they want, like for specifically what they want to run from, you know what I mean? Especially when people specialize, like, you know, I will never have an online shop. So I will always be a brochure website with a blog. So if somebody wanted to like target me with, well, I love text pattern, but you know, if somebody did like have just an offering for just that, there's loads of people like me. And I do think, like, with Shopify, they definitely have their niche for e-commerce, and definitely what you were saying about Squarespace. I do remember when they kind of even first came out, because they were so visual looking, it definitely attracted like photographers and I don't know, people that just had kind of really nice imagery even.
Now I feel like they're going for just all small businesses, like because they have also an e-commerce functionality in Squarespace, so you can add products. So I feel like they are kind of leaning more towards maybe a WordPress in a light way, in terms of just being more of a broad solution. It's really interesting. Maybe we have a little prediction here, like maybe in the future, these providers, it won't be techie based, it'll be more industry based. Like there'll be platforms for each industry, and that's how you'll choose.
I definitely think people are attracted to that. You know, they want a solution that's for them specifically. And even things like, as you were saying, courses and stuff like that, some stuff is just so specific, you can try, but like having a website that will serve courses to people while being a services pages, while being a blog, while I don't know what else you could put in there, but like having something that is trying to do, like, you know, so many different things. Maybe people will concentrate their own minds even and kind of be like, look, I want to run courses in the best way. Now, Shopify is really good at that as well. But no matter what solution you choose, I feel like now there is something there for everyone. But I think when you're creating it yourself, like, try and keep it simple. Do you really need, like, I remember back years ago, I sound like such a granny. Back years ago, okay, there used to be this thing that everybody wanted a forum with their website.
Forums are,
and I don't know why Yeah, but like literally it would
Yeah.
be like your local dentist and they'd be like, well, if I'm getting a website, I want a forum. And
Yes.
you're like, you don't need, or I guarantee you don't want a forum on your bloody website. You're a local business. Like, this is crazy talk. And everybody wanted, no matter what kind of website it was, everybody wanted a forum on their website. But it wasn't what they wanted because, like, they had no community. You know, if they did build the forum, there was nobody there to post anything anyway. So now they have all this code to like maintain and everything that literally has just empty forums with titles that was more of like I don't want to say like not an ego boost, but kind of just like a pet project or something that somebody had in their head, but it wasn't like based on reality that, oh, we have this big community and they're very engaged and they would love somewhere to post. It was just based on like nothingness. So it's, you know, like, now that's a very severe example. And if people have been in web design for a while, they'll remember when people just, everybody had to have a forum. It wasn't a website unless it had one, even when they didn't need one at all. So it is that way of thinking on your own website of like, you know, what do I really, really need?
Yeah.
You know, like, don't feel like I have to have these 5 things if they're really not even suited to your business. Like, there's nothing there in your business to feed into these other things. And actually, maybe all you need is like an online course providing ability on your website, and you don't need maybe the membership thing or what, that the courses thing would actually manage everything for you or something like that, you know.
Yeah.
Don't go too wide with it. Just keep it specific and simple and prioritize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's transition just to like wrap it up a little bit. So like things to consider, and you know, to your point here, when choosing a platform. So the first thing I think that came out that was really, I didn't even think about this, like industry. So what's your industry like? How do you make money? How is your website going to help you make money? Right. At the end of the day, we're talking about business websites, right? So you're interested in being profitable from, you know, as soon as your website's up, and having your website be part of that mission to be profitable and also impact your client base. So think about a platform that's going to serve you in that direction from day one. And to your point that you just said, is thinking in phases, maybe. So like, what is the number one priority for you in the next 6 to 12 months? And how is your website going to, you know, help you with that? So if it's, you know, if you're selling products, then you need an e-commerce website, right? If you're a coach, then maybe you don't need all the bells and whistles of something. You just need like a literal like 5-page website that has an about page, that has a services page, it has a button that takes people to like schedule calls with you. And then you have like a blog where you share your expertise. So keeping it simple from the beginning. And then if you want to think long term, and you can think, you know, if you're not really excited about the idea of migration, you can research and think about, okay, you know, if I was leaning towards Squarespace and I eventually did want to have like products, okay, Squarespace does allow you to do that. Is that the most important thing? No, but you know, I can do that. Or if you're like, if you've got the resources and you know, you're going to create courses, but courses take time to build. They take years to build. Usually, you know, maybe you'll go for something like, I don't know, potentially WordPress or Kajabi, where you know that eventually you could integrate like a login within your platform. So those are some things to consider: scalability, long-term goal functionality versus short-term goal, budget, and team. So this is, you know, it's kind of obvious, but whether you go with a WordPress or self-hosted option or more like a managed option, it sounds like we've distinguished those really well. You have to look at like, what's the cost of these things and what are the people who are going to help me? Because even if you do a Squarespace or Wix, you once in a while you still might need like a web designer. Like my website's on Squarespace, and I did eventually hire a web designer to customize mine, and she does CSS code. Like Squarespace can get technical as well. I'm sure Wix does have like a back end area. So even again, this is like a short-term, long-term conversation of thinking, okay, in the short term, I want a 5-page website that I can get up in like an hour. And then I'm like, once I have more of a budget, I can invest and customize it or make it prettier and that sort of thing.
Exactly.
And also thinking about your time, like if you did go with something that's self-hosted, you need to talk with a web developer. You need to schedule calls with them, especially at the beginning. If you're launching like a new website, it doesn't just happen magically. They're going to be sending you versions of that website. They're going to be requesting your feedback potentially. They're going to be asking you for content, for images. Do you have that time? Like, do you have time now to work on this stuff? And are you going to be able to dedicate that energy to making that happen? Right. For a lot of people, that's a big thing, right? Like maybe they have the money, but they don't have the time. So we have to look at, where do you want to prioritize each of these areas?
Yeah, I think we covered so much. It's definitely like, it must be such a minefield for people that there's so much choice. I think there is a little bit of overwhelm for sure. I love what you just said about like getting a web designer for a managed solution as well.
Yeah.
Please do that. If you have some budget there, it's not going to be as expensive as getting like your full build that's going to be hosted on the server that has to be all set up and everything. Because a front-end web designer, which would be more what I do, is coming into a system that it's already managed on the back end, we would call it, which is more like the functionality of how the content is stored and served and how the online shop is working in the background. The front end stuff is really like, it mixes in with SEO in the sense that it's just about the look, the feel, the ease of use, the layout, the content on the page, the structuring of the content. So you're a front-end web designer or SEO person, I think there's a little bit of a crossover there with both, I feel. Can work with these managed solutions. And I mean, there are, Squarespace web designers, there are Wix web designers, there are Shopify web designers that even just specialize in that. Which is incredible. Like, these are jobs that never existed before. This did not exist as a job, like being a Wix web designer or whatever. So it's amazing to see that they're opening up these new markets for people that are, more front-end web designers, let's say. So from the front-end web designer's point of view, we didn't want to be that involved in the back-end code anyway. So it's a nice kind of area to work in, because you're able to do your HTML and your CSS, and you don't have to worry so much about all the stuff that's going on in the background because it's done.
Right.
And you can concentrate on, providing good user experience, etc. So
yeah. And I mean, even if you do have the budget and you just don't have the time to engage with a web developer, you can even hire an SEO expert and a web designer, and potentially like a content writer to build your whole like copywriting website strategy, right? So there are web developers and web designers who will find images for you and like kind of give you it, like the options. There's quite a broad range of like how involved you want to be. Like I know some business owners just want to be really on top of their website, and that's great. Others are like, okay, just tell me what to do and I'll approve, sort of thing. So you have to just decide just practically, what is the time I have? Because I think once you get on board with someone, I've seen a lot of projects where there's like tension because maybe the business owner doesn't have time or whatever, and the web developer just wants to get things done. And so it's like this weird situation. But yeah, just like journaling or writing out some notes about each of these can help you make a decision of like which platform is a better fit for you right now based on all these things. And then of course, I always tell people you can always migrate. I mean, that shouldn't be the first thing you think about, but it's not the end of the world. And it's just something you can worry about down the line. Because you don't want to get into like this decision paralysis situation as well, and you just never make a decision because you just don't know, right?
Yeah, something is better than nothing. If you're
Yes.
just starting off with like a 5-page website on like Squarespace, great. Like
Yeah.
do that. Make each page like the best page that it could possibly be in the world.
Yeah.
And just start there. You, as we said, like you can grow the website. A lot of those managed solutions, maybe you grow the website and it's got loads of pages. Maybe you set up a blog and in 2 years time you're like, you know what, I'm going to add on the shop. I'm going to have an online shop as well, if that suits your business.
Yeah.
But don't feel that you have to set all these things up from day one just because
Yeah.
the ability to do it is there.
Yeah.
That you're like, oh, I'm able to set up a members area, so I'll just do that because I'm paying the same amount anyway, or whatever way, and oh well, the ability to have an online shop is there, so I guess I'll throw 3 products up there and see if people buy them. Just
Yeah.
keep it. Don't just have things because like the facility is there to do it. You can see great success with just brochure websites, and sometimes you can build that up to be like incredible website with just loads of traffic coming in, loads of inquiries, loads of sales leads. And you can, it's nice to have something that you can add stuff onto. And if you did ever need to move a website, you can do that too with the help of an SEO in a way that, minimizes the disruption, let's say.
Yeah. There's options. I think it's more about looking at, what's the priorities for you in the short and the long term, and then looking at the options there. Oh, this was so good. I feel like I learned a bunch of new things too.
Nice. Yeah, it's lovely to talk about this. I definitely think that, like, I'll just speak from my trade, like as web designers, I don't feel like we talk about this enough because maybe, some people that have been in it a long time feel a bit threatened by the newer ones that are coming along, and there might be a bit of like, WordPress versus these other ones, or like, I don't know, people probably just have a lot of feelings maybe about stuff, but, it's the right tool for the job. That's all you're choosing. It's just the right tool for this specific job. And that's all it is. It's nothing more. And having more tools to do certain jobs is great because we'll be able to get a better quality product in the end. So yeah, like there's nothing to fear. There's nothing, and even with something like WordPress, I think it's good that the competition is coming up. And when you look at the fact that they made this statement about performance, would they have ever fixed that issue if these new kind of offerings, or I call them new, but they're around 10 years themselves, but we kind of see them as new. But if these growing services didn't exist, would WordPress have issued any statement about performance, or would they have just kept on keeping on and left, what pressure was ever on them to kind of fix anything? There was never any pressure on them. So there's that little bit of pressure now, and they've come out with this statement, and it's amazing to me that it took them this long.
Yeah, it's true.
It took this long because of the competition. It took this long for the competition to up their game to actually be a real threat. And I think it's brilliant. I love it. I think it's fantastic. I want to see a really quick running WordPress. I want to see a secure, lean WordPress. I want to see themes for WordPress that are super secure, that don't require, additional stuff added in, that are made for page speed and made for leanness and ease of use. And for that to happen, people have to value that. Otherwise we are going to be stuck in the kind of poorly performing, slow, because people will think, well, I want a flashy website. So, people do need to prioritize like usability, think about user experience, think about page speed. You can still have a really pretty website, and a really lovely website, but it's actually going to be easier to use for people. And that's what will make the whole internet a better place, if people make that mental switch.
Yeah, I feel like I agree with the competition thing. And I also feel like the internet has changed, and there's a lot more websites. There's a lot more solutions. It's not even just websites. There's social media. And so our standards, what's a good website, has changed. And I think that's also something that has put a little bit of a fire under WordPress's butt, because they've kind of whatever. It's like built into a little bit of a Frankenstein.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
And
love.
now they have to tear it all down now and get the core. And I love that they said that this should not be up to a plugin to try and fix
Mhm.
what's wrong in the core
Yeah.
code. You should be able to install WordPress, and the core of it should
Mhm.
that's your foundation.
Yeah.
You know, your foundation has to be secure, has to be lean
Mhm.
and fast. And
Yeah.
then you can build on top of it with your plugins. So
Yeah.
I just think that mental switch that WordPress has made, I hope that's, you know, it's going to be a really good sign anyway for next year. And I'm excited for it because, you know, the more secure the internet is, the better experience we all have just in our literal daily lives. Because we
Yeah.
all Google stuff and we all land in on websites day in, day out. And if that website's hacked and we've clicked into something that was really bad, you know, now that's affecting us. Like,
Yeah.
worst case scenario, you're literally clicking into pages that you're giving your credit card and you think it was a valid site and it wasn't, because of all these issues that we've been discussing. And part of WordPress becoming more lean when it comes to performance for me is also security, because the less code that's there, like the less chance for exploits, just in the nature of having less code. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I feel like you could solve for both, like make it more secure, make it smaller, make it leaner.
Mhm.
And then have theme developers for WordPress that also have that mentality of, I'm going to develop a theme for WordPress that's just lightweight, easy to use, again, fast loading, lean, just, you know, just keep it all simple. I think we just need to we've gone mad and we've put on all the bells and whistles and whatever, and like 3 layers of lipstick or 4 layers of lipstick, and now we actually just need to use the makeup remover and
Tone it down.
like start again with a natural look.
Yeah, I guess like what you're saying about people getting nervous. I mean, I've always stayed super neutral with my clients about platforms because it's such a personal decision. It's kind of like, what car do you want to buy? It's like, well, like there's so many options, but and when people come to me and they're shocked because I'm kind of more leaning towards Squarespace because that's my site. I just think it's such a great solution, and it's been easy as a small business owner. And so I get shocked. I like that our conversation was like slightly not critical, but like slightly more dark toward WordPress, because I think a lot of people will be shocked like to that. That's not the typical tone, right? At least what I've heard. So anyway, the whole point is like it's not that one is good or one is bad. It's what I wanted to do with this podcast is like, are you asking the right questions? Like, are you, you know, do you have the information? Are you, if you're working with a web developer who's pushing toward WordPress, ask them about some of the stuff we mentioned, see what they say. Maybe they have it all under control. Or maybe they'll come back and be like, well, actually, you know, maybe for what you need something else. Right. So the whole point of this episode is just to help you make the right choice, right? We're not gonna, we don't, we have our personal preferences, but at the end of the day, you need to find what's going to work for your business. Thank you, Hilary. This was so great.
Thank you, Cynthia. I loved this talk, and thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I feel very, very privileged to be here, and I hope that like I had some good information and that people got something out of it. And you know, I really, it bothers me when people get overwhelmed, and I love the name of your podcast for that, because I feel like it must bother you too. That you've seen that in people, and when people tell me they're overwhelmed, I just want to like throw my cardigan over them and like give them a big hug and just hide them from the world and be like, it's gonna be fine, I promise you. Like don't be overwhelmed. There are, well, first of all, there are experts in every niche. Even if something has already gone wrong with your website, every single thing is fixable. Even if you've been hacked, you can be completely fixed, and not only can you be fixed, you can be better than what you were before you got hacked.
Yes.
You know, and stuff like that. Like people, you know, it is so stressful picking out all these things, and maybe even some of the stuff around, you know, that you don't have support for certain themes, even with managed solutions. Like if it was Shopify now, and people go, oh God, that means that if something goes wrong with my theme, now I have to go contact this third-party developer in God knows where in the world. And are they even... So there are always people to help with absolutely everything.
Yes.
And no matter whether you had a theme that was installed and something went wrong and you couldn't contact that developer, you'll be able to find someone locally to you that is an expert in that niche that will come in and help you, whether they can contact the developer or not. They'll do something to help you.
Yes.
Everything is fixable on the internet and on your website.
Exactly. Nothing's going to explode.
No problem is no problem is insurmountable. You know, and you're in a great position because you have more choice, I would argue, than has ever been available to people in the history of the internet when it comes to building a website.
Absolutely.
There has never, ever been this much choice and variety of things, like some of even the stuff we discussed, we don't really know what they're called, but these real niche things. Well, you had the course provider, but the real niche things of like paid blogs with free blogs, and there are all these super or members websites. Like there are very specialized solutions for things, and just go out there, message people, see if they reply, see if they seem like they're on top of things and they're going to give you good support and you feel good about it and you trust them. Go for it. Go for it.
There's options and nothing. You can't screw it up enough that it can't be fixed. That's the great thing about the internet. Like that's what I tell my clients. You literally can't like annihilate your website. Like you can just upload it again tomorrow. Like, so you can't, I think a lot of people just are scared of what they don't know. And so that's why we exist, to create that calmness, that tranquility, and realizing, no, like, this has happened before, or like, this is normal, or like, yeah, your website traffic went down, but you know, this can happen. And so I think for a lot of clients, it's just knowing that what they're going through, it's like, it's normal or it's okay. And there's a solution. And so that's also why I think this episode hopefully there's a lot of information, but hopefully it's information that empowers you and that, you know, helps you make the right decision, and realize that you can't make a wrong mistake as well. Like you could go with one and then switch to another. Hell, you could like start 2 websites at once, and you know, you could do a trial of Shopify. I think Shopify lets you do a week for free or something. I'm sure most of the like WordPress is a little more complex, but you could just try things out. Like you don't need to put pressure on just being perfect from the beginning.
Exactly.
So anyway, thank you again. Why don't you go ahead and just let people know where they can hang out with you a little bit more and get to know your stuff.
Yeah, so you can search Hilary Quinn on LinkedIn. I do love to connect with people there for just a business thing. I don't know, it's just it's a nice social network, one of the few. So I'm also on Twitter. I'm Proximo Webs on Twitter. My website is proximowebdesign.ie, and I have some blogs on there around, like, even if you're just planning a website and you're trying to think like, what pages do I need? I have a blog on that. I have a 5-step SEO checklist there as well. Also good for people that are maybe launching a website or even just in this kind of building stages, whether you're doing it yourself or with somebody. There's loads of stuff on there. That's proximowebdesign.ie. So you can find all my stuff there really. And I also have a podcast that Cynthia's on as well. And that's on SEOpodcast.club. The SEOpodcast.club, and that'll just bring you to the anchor page, and then you can see all the options there.
Oh, I love our conversations on Clubhouse. They're really fun.
Me too.
I will, yes, all those links will also be in the show notes for this episode, so people can find them there. Thanks again, Hilary. This was so great. Oh my God, so much good
Thank you for having me. Yeah, this was amazing. I loved it.